Hey, what's up everybody? Kono Pro here, coming back at you again with another little project we did here. Hopefully you guys enjoy. So basically we got some pantry shelves here. We're gonna install a bottom one that's gonna go from wall to wall, and there's gonna be a center one that's gonna go from wall to wall, and then with the side left piece, a return to the other wall. So I basically measure from the top shelf down to where the bottom of my new shelf is gonna be, and then I level over with that. So this is a 4-foot level. Now I like to double check my measurements because, existing shelves, those existing shelves I did not build, they might not be level. I like to build my shelves level. So now, after I have that line leveled, I level down my sides. That's the existing side ledger there. I level down. Now I level over my horizontal level over. Make sure it's level. And we're good. It's going to connect with my vertical level I just put on the wall. I tried to keep my pencil lines really light because we're going to have to do touch up, and I do not want to paint this whole pantry. So basically those are my measurements that I have here. I'm letting myself know that the top of the shelf is going to go above that line, and my ledger structural part of it's going to go below. So this is a stud finder. This stud finder basically is just a really strong magnet, and the magnet it detects screws or nails in the wall, and it detects anything metal in the wall. So if you do find something that feels like it's a nail, make sure you go up and down, and there should be nails spaced every 8 to 10 inches. Then you know that you're on a stud. If so, mark it, because that's where you're going to nail your ledger into. Now I'm measuring from wall to wall for my ledger. I made my cut. Here's my ledger. I like to cut it a little tight so it fits in nice and snug, but not too tight so it doesn't bow. I just go ahead and give it some shots. I gave it 3 shots in the corner stud there, and then now I'm going along my studs in the wall, giving it 3 shots into the studs. I'm using 2.5 inch 16 gauge galvanized brad nails that are shot out of my brad nailer that's connected to a compressor outside. So here's my other ledger, just making sure they're all up to my level line that you saw me level over earlier. Basically, you just have to measure the existing shelves, measure down, make sure all your spaces are right, measure twice, cut once. So now I'm measuring out to my line there, and that's a 45 cut. It has a 45 cut back on it, basically. And so what I do is I measure to the outside. I got a square cut on the inside, and it's going to be a 45 on the outside. I like to cut my 45 first, and then pull from the outside of my 45 to the inside of the wall. So then now I'll connect to the outside of my 45, and then I'll measure to the inside of where it's going to connect to my other ledger, the inside of the wall, and then make the square cut the last cut. If you cut the square cut first and then try to pull it out to your long point and then measure your short point and all that, sometimes it just, too many numbers will get confusing. If you keep it short and sweet, you'll find it'll work out just great. So I'm nailing it down into my corner stud, typical California framing. There's a corner stud in the corner, making sure my 2.5 inch nails connect. Everything's good. I like to put one in the top. I like to put 3 or 4 in the corner, making sure that's on my line. Gonna nail right through the face of that into my stud, because there's a stud right there. Double checking all my measurements, making sure I keep them consistent. Measuring down from my 3rd shelf here. Gonna do the same thing, run the ledgers, get everything ready to rock for my 1x12 pine shelving. So now we're good. I'm taking my measurement from wall to wall. I make sure I take an inside measurement and an outside measurement, because sometimes the existing walls aren't square. So placing all my wooden shelving on top of my ledgers that I just installed, making sure everything's level. This is a dry fitting first. I haven't nailed anything down yet. Now we're proceeding with nailing it down, rocking and rolling, getting it tacked down. What we're using here is basically a 1.5 inch brad nails. Galvy 16 gauge. You buy at your local hardware store. This nail gun, you can rent these nail guns. This nail gun I bought at my local hardware store. It's a good one. So here we go, measuring this piece over here. I like to measure it tight. You have to measure, like I say, from outside to inside, because the walnut might not be square. You see how it's not lining up? So that's because this wall is not square. So now I'll measure again from my inside and then to the outside, and I'll take off the 1/4 inch that I need to do, 1/4 inch to 0. Dry fit it back in there before I nail it down. Looks like it's gonna line up really well. Give it a light tap. You don't want it too tight, but you don't want it loose, because you want this kind of shelf, you want to have it, you know, connected really tight right there. You want it to have some pressure. It gives it strength. We're going to give it some support underneath that seam right there, but still, let's give it some nice pressure on our cut, and it'll help give it support, making sure everything is good. Now we're about to nail it down. After we nailed it down, I'm going to go ahead and put in my, this is my support that I was just talking about. It's going to go on my seam. You see here I'm using 1-inch nails so they don't go through either side of my board. So if I nail from the bottom, it won't go through the top. If I nail from the top, it won't go through the bottom. And that's, you know, if you think about that kind of stuff, your work will be clean. I nailed my right side, then my left side. Now I'm going to the top. Gonna nail the top, right side. Watch your fingers. Left side. Okay, everything looks good. Gonna give it some 2-inch nails through the top corners into the ledger to give it some more strength. Now we're gonna run some 45-degree supports right here, because the client will be putting some semi-heavy stuff on this bottom shelf. Cat litter and what have you. So what I did is I measured from my inside to my outside to my outside, just to get my measurement. And then what I like to do is I like to cut a 45, check my grain, see if that looks good, see how how the reveal is gonna line up. Not liking that, I like this side better, it has the least knots. So I'm gonna go ahead and put the 45 on this side. Nice. Now I'll measure from my long point to long point, which is what I measured earlier when I measured from basically the top of the baseboard to the edge of my ledger, side ledger there. And but still I have the mark there, but then now I'll double check it with my speed square, as it should, if it's a 45, a true 45, it should just square back, meaning that it should be lined up square with the ledger, and then that should provide your line you can transfer over onto your board if everything lines up good. Sort of a bad shot, but it does line up perfect. I like to give my cuts a little bit of a strong cut, so I'll give it like 1 inch or a 1/4 inch, 1/2 inch stronger cut than what I know it is. And then I'll cut it and make sure that we're right where we want to be, and then I'll cut it down and trim it to where it needs to be. So see, it's a little strong there. Perfect, everything looks good. We're gonna cut another 1/4 inch off that top 45-degree angle there. How does it look? Perfect. All right, ready to rock. That's how we do it. Nice. So we need to duplicate the thing on the left side, basically the same cuts and everything. So I dry fit that piece. It fit perfect. So now I basically scribe it on another board. No need to measure or anything. Just put it on a board and give it a little pencil mark, and there it is. Wham bam, we got the other side. Give it a cut. Now make sure when you place your blade, you don't cut off the line. You want to make sure you place your blade correctly when you make that cut. So everything looks good. Shooting it into my corner 2x4s there. And then I shoot it up into my ledger. I'm shooting it up into the ledger to give it support. I give it 1 vertical shot, 2 shots. Strength is sound, everything's good. That's gonna bear the weight down into that corner stud there on the wall. Nail on the left side. Now we're gonna throw in some latex painter's caulking. This is basically it's paintable caulking. Make sure you guys always use paintable caulking. when you're doing a project like this. Now, whatever brand you use, that's fine, but make sure it's paintable. It states that it's paintable. So I go around the edges. I make sure I have a damp rag with me, and then I'll use my fingers to fill it into the holes, what have you. But I always make sure my fingers are damp, because then it smooths along the caulking. And you need to move quick and work fast, because the caulking will set up on you, and it'll leave, not the prettiest of product. And I like my products to look nice and pretty. So we're making sure everything's good. I go over it with my damp rag after I'm done. I like to really seal all the joints and seams. It makes everything strong, long lasting. When I go to my projects 5 or 6 years, 10 years after I've built them, they're basically the same as when I left them. So here we are, we're filling them in. I use the caulking tip to fill in just the gaps. If you want to get really fancy, you can fill it all in with wood putty, but not needed. It's just some pantry shelves, but still, it looks beautiful with just some latex caulking if you apply it right. So now we fill it in the holes, like I say, and we're wiping it down with a damp rag. And like I mentioned earlier, we want to make sure we keep as much as that product off the wall and the wall as clean as possible. So when we touch up the wall, we don't have to basically repaint the whole pantry. So I put some wood filler, some wood filler on the knots too, the day before, after I did the caulking, and I let that dry overnight. This is the following day, and the wood filler's dry, the caulking's dry. I'm sanding the wood filler down, gonna give everything a light little lockdown, knock it all down so it all looks nice, and then we're gonna go ahead and apply some paint. Make it look pretty. This is a primer. You always apply a primer first. When it's a raw wood, always apply primer. You can get paint and primer products, and if you want to take that risk and skip that section, that part of the process, then fine. But I would still recommend applying some primer to the raw wood before you apply the paint and primer. Then you have a really, really good product on top of the wood, protecting the wood, long lasting, shouldn't peel, shouldn't scratch. It's a real durable product. So I cut in the sides first. I like to use a brush when I'm applying the primer because it puts on a real thick coat, really thick coat. And then when I do the finish paint, I'll apply, use it with a roller. Here's the finished paint. It's what this is here is basically a semi-gloss ultra pure white. I like to roll it on really thick first on the top, and then I'll cut it in with my brush real good, making sure we're coated on the bottoms, the sides, the tops. I don't like to cheat. I like to make sure I get everything. Now after the shelves are painted, 2 coats, I go ahead and I'm cutting in now the wall color. So I went ahead and just before I installed that ledger, I actually removed a little chip of the existing wall color where I was going to install the ledger so it wouldn't affect the wall, and I got that matched. And I got a little 1/4 inch of that, touched it up, and there it is. All right, everybody, there it is. Final touch up. It's all looking good. That's how we do it. Hope you all love the video. Please leave some comments below. Let us know any feedback. We really appreciate it. And we enjoyed making the video for you. And please subscribe and give us some likes. Hope all is well. Know Pro.